Hi everybody, great to be here. Palm Springs is beautiful. This is my first time here. It's nice to be among all these leaders in the industry. I'm here today to talk a little bit about embracing innovation and expanding the care continuum. We're all up against this 10% or so penetration rate. Talk about the Silver Tsunami. We've been talking about the coming age wave. Some of today's options based upon what we're seeing from our, in our business, what's trending, how we can expand the care continuum across the whole sort of aging journey, how innovation can increase the senior living penetration rate ultimately, and then we'll talk a little bit about senior living as a service. Is something that we're trying to coin as a new way of catering to a new demographic entering the space, and then some key takeaways. So these are my grandparents, Joseph and Margarita. They were there when I grew up. I was very close with them. I love them very much. And they are really the influence for me getting into this industry. They're immigrants from South America. They live the American dream. They have a lot to be proud of. They had a lot of kids and a lot of grandkids and lived a really nice life. And 5 or 6 years ago, I started a company for my grandfather. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. My grandmother was 82 or so at the time, trying to care for him. It was really difficult for the family. And so I would go and provide respite care. She was still very active and very mobile, and so she would call me up at a moment's notice. Hey, my friends want to meet me at Starbucks in a half an hour. Can you let me get out of the house? Can you come just sit and watch your grandfather for a little bit? And I'd go, and I went and what started relatively infrequently became pretty frequent. And I remember calling a bunch of home care agencies, local home care agencies, with a simple request. Hey, can you send over a caregiver? It doesn't even need to be a CNA or an HHA, just a caregiver to come sit with my grandfather for, at a moment's notice and for an hour or two. And of the 5 places I called, I got laughed off the phone 5 of those times. They said, no way, we got to send out a nurse for an evaluation. We got to do a minimum of 20 hours a week. These, caregivers are on a tight schedule, and we have to make sure that scheduling is done in advance. And I go, well, that's not really how my grandmother's life works. Like, how is that feasible? This is 2015. Everyone's Uberizing everything, the Uber for this and the Uber for that. So I remember I called up my cousin Andrew, and I go, Andrew, let's build the Uber for grandkids, and let's just see if we can provide companionship and assistance to people like my grandfather, but really for my grandmother, and maybe we can make a really big impact. So we started a company. We called it Papa after what we called my grandfather. Fast forward 5 years, 6 years, Papa's doing thousands of visits a day across the entire country, operating in all 50 states. And we learned a lot about the older adult and the changing and evolving needs of the older adult. But this is not a story about Papa. This is a story about my grandmother, really. Because my grandfather, after he declined, he moved into one memory care community and then moved into another memory care community after he got kicked out of the first one for bad behavior, which is indicative of the rest of his life. He was always on pretty bad behavior. But it's really about my grandmother. My grandmother now, he moved into this memory care community, passed away not too long after. And she found herself alone, now at 87, in otherwise perfect health. She had this big 2-story house that she was living in. And she needed help with small things. Not with everything, but small things, like driving outside a 3-mile radius she wasn't comfortable with, and driving at night, and grocery shopping was too cumbersome for her. Picking up that 24-pack of water bottles off the shelf. She couldn't do it alone. And so we sold her house to sort of extend her financial runway because she was running out of cash. And we got her an apartment in the same neighborhood near her doctors and near her grandchildren and near her friends. And I acted as this home manager, this person that went to the bank to help her pay her rent and helped her get her groceries during COVID and drove her to the other family members that we had that would have dinner parties on Saturday night. And the story is important because it led us to the creation of UpsideHōM, which is deconstructing senior living. We're providing for the healthy ager sort of a new way, a flexible way to live in apartments in neighborhoods that you know and love. So what does this mean? My grandmother's not alone. There's millions of people like my grandmother that find themselves, due to some sort of trigger event, in this position. They're healthy, they're otherwise fine, they're not necessarily ready for traditional senior living, but they need some extra IADL support type services. 46 million seniors today in the US, 90 million by 2060. These numbers are staggering. It's almost hard to comprehend how big this market is and how different each person in this demographic really is. As much as we all try to bucket people into groups, the 65 to 75, the 75 to 85, It's really, what we're finding is it's really, really challenging, and everyone truly needs a customized and individualized approach. This aging in place statistic, this bothers me a little bit. 90% of people say they want to age in place when they're asked at 55 years old whether they want to age in place, and they're still of sound mind and body. And then when they break a hip or they have a stroke, they can no longer age in place, then what? So this idea, I think, is flawed fundamentally of aging in place. And I think Bob Kramer says it all the time, it's about aging in the right place. And whether that right place is a memory care facility or a assisted living community or an UpsideHōM, there is going to need to be a tremendous amount of variety for this demographic coming into this. So, and then we have this affordability problem, right? So one of the things that my grandmother did was she sold the house that she had equity in order to live with these supportive services for the rest of her life. Not everyone is going to be in that situation. Not everyone is going to have home equity, and some people have been renting for the last 30 years, and then what do they do? So this is I think this is all of our challenges. We have to figure out how to create a more affordable option for the people that are coming into this. And that's TBD. We're going to have to figure that out together. The options that my grandmother had today were she could live alone. She could go to a traditional senior living community, which she indicated she wasn't ready for. She felt like she was 25 in her heart and in her mind, but so she didn't really want to be just surrounded with older adults. Or she could move in with family. And these three options present, they're bad options for many different reasons for someone like my grandmother. Loneliness, we know, increases all health risks, basically. Loneliness is determined to be a social determinant of health and causes all these negative health outcomes. And PAPA, as a matter of fact, is doing most of its business through Medicare Advantage because PAPA is reducing loneliness at scale as a social determinant. It's difficult to maintain a house or a condo without help, and it's expensive to pay for unnecessary extra space. Senior living is too expensive for many. People aren't quite ready, like my grandmother. They just need a little bit of extra assistance and IADL support. And we're up against the pretty persistently low penetration rate. I mean, 90% of people say they want to age in place. That's a challenging, daunting task. And then, of course, moving in with family. This is popular in other countries. For some reason, it's not stuck in the US. There's a burden, it puts a burden, an undue burden on older adults or adult children who are also raising their kids. And it's sort of against US cultural norms. So what are we seeing? What's trending? Well, we talked about it a little bit this morning. People are living longer than ever, and this care continuum is starting earlier than ever, and it's lasting longer. Everyone ages differently. The 65-year-old might have type 2 diabetes and is immobile or has trouble with ADLs, and then you have 95-year-olds that are running marathons. So for us to bucket these things is dangerous, and we're going to struggle to find a right solution if we can't figure out how to customize different options for people, I think. We're seeing this idea of perceived independence versus actual independence, and I'll get into what we think that is in a little bit. This idea of flexible aging too, we've heard it a couple of different times now. How can you get the services and the support that you need when you need them, but don't pay for them when you don't need them? Bob's quote of aging in the right place versus aging in place is sort of fundamentally flawed, I believe. And then this idea of intergenerational relationships, which we learned with PAPA. We were providing mostly college students at the beginning with older adults for companionship, and it was really a magical thing to mix those generations. So longer lives means longer aging journey, right? Needs among healthy agers vary widely. Some people still drive, some people don't. Some people still cook, some people don't. IADL support needs could last a decade. We're talking about a really long third of life, or whatever, that 8,000 days was really interesting to me. I haven't heard that before, so that was cool. ADL support needs might become shorter. People might be able to prolong their well-being if we can tackle some of these support services early on. And then this longer care continuum is necessary. People don't understand senior living. I mean, we all fight against, well, senior living is all nursing homes. It's not true. People don't understand the nuance in senior living. And so I think it's on all of us to do a better job at educating and bringing people into that care continuum earlier so that we can educate about what that right place might be. Talked a little bit about this already. Flexibility in service offerings, customizable and tailored experiences. This idea of empowerment and self-service tools, it goes back to perceived independence versus actual independence. If you can empower people with tools that enable them to do things on their own, they're sort of not really independent because they're ordering meals from you or they're ordering transportation from you, so they really can't be fully independent, but their perception is that they're independent because they're ordering those things on their own. And if you can make a really easy self-service way of getting those things that people need to them when they need them, people continue to be happy. Actual independence can be pretty dangerous for an 85-year-old that might break their hip tomorrow and be immobile. So being independent is different than the perception of being independent, we feel. What exactly is flexible aging? Well, we break it down here, like get what you need and not what you don't. Pay only for what you need and not what you don't need. And then providing optionality. We're finding the prospects and customers that are coming from us and residents, future residents are coming to us. They want to be near their doctors and they want to be near their grandchildren and they want to be, they want covered patios and they want gyms with water yoga and they want all of these different specific things. So all of us need to figure out how we can provide this varied optionality for our older adult residents, whether that's within our communities or outside the walls of those communities. And then flexibility. We're seeing a lot, well, can I spend 6 months in Florida and 6 months in New Jersey? Or can I spend 6 months in California and 6 months in Nevada? Offering flexible options for people so that they can dip their toes into how great senior living could be for them, I think is really important. We're seeing a lot of requests for that. And it's hard for us to be that flexible at this point, but we're getting there. Aging in place versus aging in the right place, right? This idea of viability of aging in place is not great. Along the aging journey, at some point, aging in place becomes unviable because that house is too big, it's too expensive to maintain, or because you don't need the extra 3 bedrooms, or because you don't have any money anymore and you need to sell that house to live the rest of your life. So while aging in place does sound nice at face value, it's really impractical for most. We're seeing common trigger events as the death of a spouse or physical or mental ailments as a result of needing to make that decision. So we're looking at this idea of senior living as a service, right? What is senior living as a service? Senior living as a service to us means enhancing the most important components of community-based living while reducing the associated cost, supporting scale, and bringing a younger, lower acuity mix, type of person into the mix. But the best things that senior living provides, community and easy access to services, is becoming increasingly possible to do outside the walls of a facility type of environment. And so we see eventually people being able to provide or access senior living, quote unquote, in the comfort of their own homes or their own apartments. The need for creative thinking is now. I think we all feel that. There's things that we're doing that are working really, really well. And there's things that we're doing that may or may not work well for the incoming baby boomers that we're all waiting for. We want to broaden the base and expand the care continuum. We think we can capture a younger, healthier, lower acuity person, bring them in, educate them about how there's a variety of options for them, and then make those options really accessible and available. We think we can increase the penetration rate by doing that and keep people safe as they age and along that aging journey. It's on all of us to embrace this demographic shift. Yes, 11,000 people a day are turning 65, and it's coming whether we're ready for it or not. And the market will need a lot of different offerings, and it's going to be imperative that we all work together to get them people the things that they need and the things that we'll want. And of course, the caregiver shortage is on. We're all feeling it, and so embracing technology. I think everyone here is doing that to a certain extent. Embracing technology to drive efficiencies and make the use of that caregiver more efficient is going to be really critical. And we have to get really creative about how we do that.
Jake, as you've been developing your UpsideHōM model, what have been the biggest surprises to you about the consumer behavior? And are there things they're seeking you hadn't anticipated they would seek, or vice versa, things you thought they would want that you're not finding that's not really what they're in the market for?
It's a good question. We've had a lot of surprises and continue to. People really want a lot of options, it seems like. They'll come to us for one thing, they'll see that we have a variety of different offerings, and they'll look for something different. So this idea of touring once, touring twice, touring 4 times, touring 10 times, we've seen it. And so being able to really match the right community for the right person is really, really critical. And that goes for the services piece as well. People think they need or don't need certain things, and then when they move in, you realize that they need more than I think we see this all the time in IL to AL. People come in, I'm totally independent, I just like the 2 meals a day that you provide. And then they get there and it's like, this is an AL person. And so we're seeing that people underestimate the things that they actually might need, which is, it's good and bad for us.